where are we at on week 6? Have we got there yet?
Oh yeah, another episode that I'm very so looking forward to people checking out, which is the Chris Colt episode, which is definitely something that you and I had talked about like years ago, I feel like, as a potential for this. And I'd always seen photographs of him. There's not much footage that's out there of Chris Colt, but
we looked.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, right. Yeah, I know. But just really one of the best wrestlers that you've never heard of is what I would categorize him. Just an amazing, pioneering, well before his time, sort of psychedelic rock and roll wrestler. Incredible, doing very much an Alice Cooper vibes in what his persona looked like at his prime. And I remember just being so enraptured by the photographs and wanting to know more. And then, of course, you maybe on the podcast or in other places, or just, when we were together, told me about the story where, this is kind of the lifestyle the guy had, is he would, he took a bunch of acid and went out to the ring and, it was a cage match, and then the acid peaked and all of a sudden he's, hallucinating that giant spiders are taking over the cage and trying to destroy him from within.
And I can't take credit for this story because all the guys who had known Chris during the time he was in the business, and the guys from the Pacific Northwest and the people who were around him, they have kept this story alive. But it's one of the more fascinating ones, and I mentioned it to you. But I've termed him also. We've talked about him a lot here on the show. The best wrestler nobody ever saw, or the best wrestler nobody remembers, or whatever.
There you go.
And it was because he was so fascinating. And he was, once again, this is a guy who, because of his personal habits and choices, even though a lot of people liked him, and he, as a wrestling fan, you would look and say, that guy's a great wrestler, but he was his own worst enemy. And that's why he didn't make it bigger in a lot of cases, and didn't stay places longer. Mm-hmm. But when every time I saw him, he would get over with people. And I shared with you the video footage, 7 seconds of it may make the show, but he was one of the opponents when they reunited the Fabulous Fargos, mm-hmm. Jackie and Don and Roughhouse, in 1975 in Memphis, and drew huge houses all over the territory. It was Chris Colt and his valet / brother Bill Colt, who was Billy Anderson from Phoenix, as an 18-year-old kid. I'm good. I love Bill Anderson, but he was 18 years old and wanted to get in the wrestling business, and he gets taken to Tennessee with this fucking maniac.
Trial by fire. Yeah.
And then Bill Dundee was the third partner, because, as we've talked about, hippie Mike Boyette was too crazy for that group, and they got in a fight. But the point is, I saw him. I'd never seen him before. And yes, it's against the Fargos, but he was a one-man show. Even Bill Dundee, who's out there taking bumps and shit. Mm-hmm. Colt's at another level. And Roughhouse hits him over the head with the chair, and the chair horse collars him, a folding chair. And Colt turns around and takes a bump over the top rope with a chair still folded up around his neck. Mm-hmm. Or he'd go upside down in the turnbuckles. He'd do the splash off the top, where he would bounce on his stomach and bounce to his back. And at the same time, because you could tell he was just a weird personality, he could project that, and he would get tons of heat from the people, not just because he was taking these bumps, but he got under their skin. But you'd see him just long enough to say, wow, I like all the shit that guy's doing. And then he's gone.
Yeah, and I can't remember exactly the territory or the year off the top of my head, but I mean, when you mention him being a heel, I mean, I think he went on television and burned an American flag.
Goddamn, was that when he was Chris Von Colt?
I think so.
In Birmingham, Continental.
Possibly. It's been a minute since I've watched the episode and worked on it, but yeah, I mean, you talk about that. I think he was also doing the kind of Randy Savage style top rope elbow drop in the 70s, which is pretty cool. Just
on those concrete rings that they had small territories. And even before this, he was partners with Don Fargo, and they did the various chain gang gimmicks and incarnations. And that's probably where he probably had the most success and actually lasted the longest. That was only a couple of year period, but they were AWA World Tag Team Champions and, used well all over the place. But there you've got two guys that weren't going to stay anywhere for too long. It's amazing they lasted that long. And then, unfortunately, Colt not only didn't work a lot of the big money territories, but didn't work a lot of the territories that saved
Mm-hmm.
any of their video libraries. So you don't really see much, but then the out of the ring stories are again even more bizarre, and there's an element of mystery to this. Why, I was always intrigued by him because even his friends lost track of him, and there was rumors that he was dead or alive, and then he shows up at his, friend Dean Silverstone's record store one time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
And oh my gosh. And then, they find out he's in a homeless shelter or died in the homeless shelter of AIDS and nobody knew. It's just, he could, this could be one of those unsolved mysteries where what really happened to Chris Colt? Is he really dead? Who knows for sure?
Yeah, I mean, the episode definitely answers a lot of that. I remember I tweeted out at some point during season 3 or something, just expressing publicly like I'd like to do a Chris Colt episode, and I remember I got a message from this guy named Ty, who was his, I guess you call it grand nephew. I don't know how that works out, but he messaged me and was like, if you ever decide to do it, like, we're the family and we'd like to talk to you about it. And he had, which is in the episode, and we really utilized it quite a lot, which you'll see in the episode, which is very different for us, is Chris Colt's diary.
Oh my God.
Is a big part of the episode. So you see, we show kind of the writing of his diary on the screen, and we had someone narrate it just so you can there's some way to bring it to life. But it's him in his own words telling a lot of stuff about his story. And, of course, with someone like Chris Colt, you don't know exactly how much of it is, if it's true or not or whatever. But, he talks about meeting Janis Joplin in the late 60s and things like that, on the street, and all these just crazy escapades and things like that. Because he idolized Janis Joplin. I mean, that was his, that was his idol.
Well, and if he's writing it for himself, then he probably was being more honest, one would think. And and that's because, again, he was a fan of wrestling as a kid. And Tom Burke had mentioned, the great historian in the Northeast, had mentioned that, he was pen pals because Tom was, I think, in the 50s when they had the Pony Express, Tom Burke was trading programs. But it was like early 60s. He's been pen pals with this kid from out west, and all of a sudden he shows up working for Tony Santos, the Outlaw promotion up there in Boston, and training. And he's like, wow, he moved all the way across the country to do this.
Yeah, and shout out to Tom Burke, by the way, because he's great in the episode. And being able to talk to him was amazing. Obviously super respected wrestling historian. He had tons of photos of Chris Colt, which is awesome. Just any footage or photos is welcome for this. And he was a pen pal with Chris from a very long time, and up until, I think, for a while. I think they were in communication for a long time, and Tom reads the last letter he got from Chris in the episode, and so that's really cool. And then one of the big mysteries, which I guess, I don't know, we got to get people to watch this because he might not know Chris Colt, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. But you had mentioned in the episode something to the effect of, well, people hadn't heard from him for years, and then he shows up in an adult film, right?
Yeah.
And so we were able to track down the director of said adult film, which is amazing. And so he had a completely different point of view and relationship to not only just wrestling, but to Chris, and provided us with a lot of amazing footage. For example, I can't remember.
Wait a minute. Now is Vice dropping some of their network practices now for this type of footage?
Whoops, I didn't mean that. But there's other types of footage where I think he had interviewed Chris. Just sitting around smoking cigarettes, talking about life and things he'd experienced. So there's that footage in there too, which is pretty amazing. So you
Oh
get to
my
hear
God.
him. Yeah. So I mean, it's pretty cool. We definitely went to town on it, and it's one of those discovery episodes. We try to throw in one real deep cut. Johnny Canine was one, in the past, and stuff like that. You may never heard of these wrestlers, but wow, their stories are super fascinating, and this is definitely one of the more fascinating ones for sure. And we had to do the spider gimmick for this too, which was a lot of fun to shoot.
Yes, and again, we're going to find out. Did you go to like Rick Baker or the special effects gurus or whatever for this, or?
No. We have a weird thing where we never have enough money or time to do anything digitally or any of that stuff. So we do it all in camera, and we built a very tiny, small ring, model ring, and we brought in tarantula, experts, who and we used real spiders crawling over.
At least maybe, but at least you won't be able to see through the spiders like you could see through the Amazing Colossal Man, right?
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yep. So there you go.
Well,